1. Once upon a time, in a quiet little village nestled between hills and rivers, there lived a boy named Ethan. He was bright, brilliant even, but his mind was like a butterfly on a windy day, fluttering from one thought to another. He'd sit down to read, only to end up staring out the window. He'd begin a task with good intentions, then get distracted by a new idea, a buzzing phone, or the sound of kids playing outside. People around him said he lacked discipline, that he'd never go far if he couldn't focus. Over time, those voices got louder. And slowly, Ethan started believing them. He felt like his mind was working against him, like no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't hold on to the present moment. One afternoon, after another failed attempt to study, Ethan sat down with his grandfather, a quiet man known in the village for his calm presence. "Why can't I just stay focused?" Ethan asked in frustration. His grandfather didn't lecture him. He didn't tell him to try harder. He simply leaned back and said, "Let me tell you a story. Not about talent, not about intelligence, but about something far more powerful. The thing that turns noise into clarity, chaos into growth, and struggle into success. That thing, my boy, is patience." Ethan blinked. Patience? It sounded too simple, too slow. But what he didn't know yet was that this story would change everything. And here's the real question for you. What if the reason you feel stuck isn't because you're doing too little, but because you're not giving your efforts enough time to grow? What if your breakthrough is already on its way, but you just need to wait for the season to change? Let's begin. Ethan wasn't a bad kid. In fact, most people said he was gifted, sharp, curious, even creative. But those compliments were often followed by a sigh. If only he could just focus. That was the sentence that haunted him, from classrooms to dinner tables. And the truth? It stung, because it was true. He would sit down to study, full of good intentions, only to find himself staring at the corner of the window 5 minutes later, wondering why birds flew in V-shapes. He'd try to write an essay, then suddenly feel an urge to check his messages, adjust the pencil angle on his desk, or re-watch a video he'd already seen 3 times. His mind was a storm of distractions, tiny thoughts swirling so fast that he never had time to hold on to just one. And over time, all that noise turned into something heavier: self-doubt. His teachers called him easily distracted. His classmates called him spacey. His parents, though loving, looked worried. And slowly, Ethan began to believe the story others had written about him. That maybe he was just someone who couldn't finish things. Someone who'd always be almost good. It wasn't laziness. It was deeper than that. He wanted to concentrate. He wanted to feel that sense of calm clarity others seem to find so easily. But no matter how hard he tried, something always pulled him away. And so, the question began to take root, not out of frustration, but out of desperation. What's wrong with me? And how do I fix it? One evening, as the sky faded into soft shades of gold, Ethan sat on the porch steps outside his home. The world around him was still, almost too still, and that same question echoed again in his head. Not the loud kind of question, the quiet kind. The kind that doesn't shout, but lingers, like a whisper that refuses to go away. That's when he noticed his grandfather, sitting quietly in his usual chair, sipping tea, eyes calm like the surface of a lake. He was the only person in Ethan's world who never seemed in a hurry. He never raised his voice, never criticized, never rushed, just watched, listened, and when the time was right, spoke with words that somehow stuck. Ethan sat beside him, unsure how to begin. After a long silence, he finally asked, "Grandpa, why can't I focus? Why does my mind feel like it's everywhere at once?" His grandfather didn't flinch. He just looked out at the horizon and said a single word: patience. Ethan blinked. Patience? He repeated, confused. That wasn't an answer. That was vague, gentle, almost disappointing. But his grandfather didn't explain. He didn't lecture. He just smiled and took another sip of tea, like the rest would come in time. And something in that quiet confidence made Ethan lean in. Because deep down, he felt it. This wasn't just an answer. It was a seed. And maybe, just maybe, it was about to grow into something that could change everything. The word hung in the air. Patience. Ethan didn't quite understand it. Not yet. But something about the way his grandfather said it made him pause. Not the kind of pause that comes from confusion. The kind that comes just before something important begins. Sensing Ethan's curiosity, his grandfather set down his teacup and leaned forward. "Let me tell you a story," he said. "It's an old one, but it carries a truth that many forget in a world that keeps moving faster." He began. Once upon a time, in a quiet farming village, there lived two men, Lucas and Jalen. They were neighbors, grew up side by side, started farming at the same time. Same tools, same soil, same seeds. On paper, they were identical. But they had one difference. Lucas was driven, ambitious, eager to succeed, and quickly. He planted his seeds and checked them every day, expecting change. When he didn't see results, he grew impatient. He'd dig them up to see if they were working. He changed fertilizers, adjusted planting rows, even switched crops halfway through the season. From the outside, he looked busy, productive, but underneath, he was restless. Jalen, on the other hand, moved slower, not because he was lazy, but because he believed. He believed in the rhythm of the earth. He planted his seeds, watered them daily, and waited. He didn't check every hour. He didn't change his plan. He trusted the process, and when doubts crept in, as they do, he simply reminded himself, growth takes time. Months passed. The village moved through sun and rain, wind and stillness. As harvest season approached, Lucas grew more anxious. His crops were thin, patchy, uneven. He blamed the weather, the soil, even luck. But deep down, he knew the truth. He never gave anything enough time to root. Jalen's field was quiet. Until one morning, it wasn't. His land burst into life. Golden wheat swayed in the wind. Vegetables bloomed in rich color. His crops were strong, healthy, full. The village gathered, wide-eyed, asking how he had done it. Jalen just smiled. Lucas stood in silence, exhausted, confused, but more than anything, humbled. Ethan listened to the story, eyes wide. He could see himself in both men. The rushing, the doubting, the wanting to change paths the moment things got hard. But Jalen was something different. Not slower, not weaker, just steadier. He had something Ethan didn't fully understand yet. Trust. His grandfather looked at him and said quietly, "In life, the one who moves fastest isn't always the one who gets the most. It's the one who trusts deepest, who plants, who nurtures, and who stays." And for the first time, Ethan didn't feel broken. He felt invited into a different way of being. One that wasn't about chasing results, but about becoming someone who could hold still long enough for something beautiful to grow. The next morning, Ethan woke up a little differently. Not louder, not faster. just different. There was a softness in him, like the echo of something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. His grandfather's story still played in his mind, and for the first time, he felt like maybe his scattered thoughts weren't the enemy. Maybe he'd just never learned how to stay with them long enough to understand. He didn't try to change everything at once. No big goals, no checklists, just one small experiment. He decided to slow down. He opened a book, not to finish it, but just to be with a single page. He let the words land instead of racing to the next line. When he helped his mom in the garden, he watered a plant without thinking about how tall it would be next week. No more rushing the results, no more tugging on the roots. He began doing ordinary things with full attention, brushing his teeth, tying his shoes, folding his shirt, and each one became a quiet practice in presence. At first it felt strange, like walking against the current. But deep down, something in him whispered, "This is the way back." Of course, not every day was peaceful. Some days felt impossible. The distractions came roaring back, loud as ever. His phone still buzzed. His thoughts still wandered. And sometimes he wanted to quit, to go back to the familiar rhythm of chaos. Because letting go of urgency isn't just hard. It's uncomfortable. It feels like you're falling behind when the world around you is sprinting. But Ethan kept going. And slowly, he started noticing something new. Small wins. Moments when he read 2 pages without glancing at the clock. Moments when he stayed in a conversation without checking his phone. Moments when he caught his thoughts drifting and gently brought them back without shame. He began to feel a kind of peace he'd never known before. Not because the noise disappeared, but because he wasn't chasing it anymore. And something else changed, too. Focus no longer felt like a war. It felt like a gift, one he could offer himself any time he chose to be fully present. It wasn't about fixing his brain. It was about changing how he related to it. And just like that, Ethan had begun to grow roots. Patience isn't just sitting still. It's not giving up. It's not folding your hands and waiting for life to rescue you. Patience is active, alive, brave. It's waking up every day and showing up, even when no one sees you. It's believing in your journey, even when you don't yet see results. It's continuing, especially when you're tempted to quit. Because trusting what you can't yet see, that takes more strength than rushing toward what you can. Your growth is not on someone else's clock. And just because they can't see it, doesn't mean it's not happening. So now, let me ask you, what if your breakthrough is already growing, quietly, beneath the surface of your life? What if your struggle isn't a sign you're failing, but a sign you're getting closer? What if you don't need to push harder, but stay longer? Because your patience, your quiet commitment to keep going, isn't weakness. It's not something to be ashamed of. It is your quiet superpower. And one day, when your roots are deep and your harvest begins to bloom, you'll realize you weren't falling behind. You were simply growing stronger, in silence,